Hi, I wanted to spend some time with you and talk to you a little bit about the most important article in all of the readings that you'll have for this class, and that's in the first week of the readings under the notion of sustainability. So the sustainable leader. There's a link there to an article that gives you the typology for leadership theory. So we're going to be reading a lot of leadership theory, but I want you to know how that fits in the family of theories that we're going to be studying throughout this semester. So that's why this lecture is so important, and that's why that article is so important. If you know that article and have mastered that article, then you're going to be able to pass the test a lot more easily and write the papers a lot more easily, because you're going to understand the implications of each of these theories that we write about. Now, I'm going to give you in the next 5 minutes sort of my take on that article, and I hope it's helpful it helps you understand that article, because it's really, really an important thing. And I've enlisted some very important visual elements for this. Some of the toys that are left over from our children, and now for our grandchildren, Tinker Toys, which explain the world. Legos are also good, but I'm going to use Tinker Toys. Now, the foundation for everything we've ever built in leadership theory is something called the divine right of kings, or the notion of monarchy, or the king sort of theories that say that, kings were mandated by God to be the leader. They were at the top. Everybody else is below them, but God put them in their place. And so you have kings in France, in Italy, in England, in all over the world, in all conditions. You have the emperor and empress in China. You have the emperor and empress in Japan. You have the kings all throughout all of Polynesia. In most tribal or non-tribal cultures, you have a king. In most tribal cultures, you have some sort of a leader that is also there because of this divine anointing by birth. And so birth puts them in that position. Birth makes you a duke or a lady or a lord. Birth makes you a servant or a serf or a peasant, and so you have nothing. All of that is divine order, and you can't do anything about it. But then we have that notion of revering the king or the queen sometimes, but revering that person. Most often in history, it's male person. Well, 300 years ago, that notion begins to be shattered because Jean-Jacques Rousseau and John Locke start writing things in England, and the Magna Carta comes about, and the American Revolution happens with the Declaration of Independence, and suddenly we're left there with this idea that, kings can't do everything right, and kings are not the divine people that we thought they were. But they're still in the back of our minds. It molds our minds. It molds the way we think about it. So we start saying, well, maybe kings are not the only people who are great leaders, but there are great men out there, and they are our leaders. And those great men become our leaders in some ways. And so we have this great man theory of leadership, and we start thinking, what is it like to be a great man? What do great men do? And we have this idea, great men are tall, great men are tough, great men are good thinkers, great men are always the smartest person in the room. All of these different things that we think about great men. So we write about and think about great men a whole lot, and we have these great man theories of leadership. But then, Queen Victoria was probably the most influential here. But along the way, we run into these women who also have these great traits, and they're also great leaders. And so they shatter that notion of great men only. And so we add, let's put in a trait theory of leadership here. Let's sort of separate trait theory out a little bit and say, well, women can be great leaders too. All you have to do is have these certain traits. And so by 1930 and the 1930s, that's how we were thinking about leadership mostly, is that you had to have certain traits. You had to be a certain kind of a person. And there were rare individuals like Amelia Earhart, women who were that way, but there were lots of men who were that way. And we liked generals. We admired generals, and we admired colonels. We admired people with rank because they were great men. And it was sort of a logic loop that, well, if you are a colonel, you must be a great man, or if you are a general, you must be a great man. So what do generals like? They're like this. Okay, the generals are like this. And so we're in this logic loop that sort of turns us around that way. Well, by the 1940s and World War II and even into the 1950s, behavioralism was really taking root in all academic disciplines. Excuse me. And so we started to develop behavioral theories of leadership. We said, it's not the traits as much as it is, what do you actually do? What do you do? It's not what's going on in your heart and in your head, and it's not about that so much as it is, what do you actually do? How do you behave? And so you can learn, we can teach leadership because we can teach you to behave in certain ways. And if we teach you to behave in certain ways, you will be a good leader. And that will be a universal sort of theory that will take you through. If you have these behaviors and do these things, if you have these 7 habits of highly successful people, then you will be a highly successful person. And that's how we thought about leadership. And some of our writers are trait theorists, and some of our writers are behavioral theorists, and some of them are little even great man types as you go through the readings. Well, that didn't tell us what we needed to know about leadership. Something was missing, because the whole leadership process and all of the things that go with that came into being. And so we decided, hey, we need to understand leadership not as something that is actually a characteristic, but that is a sort of a moving part. And so we developed process theories of leadership that said, it's not what leaders are that is important here, and it's not their traits, and it's not a great man, and it's even not their behaviors, but that great leaders are people who enact certain processes and do certain things. And that's what your first reading is about by Peter Drucker this second week, is what do great leaders do? What processes do they manage? What things do they have to do and work in the milieu? So you have those really 4 basic theories of leadership. There's that great man theory, trait theory, behavioral theory, and process theory. And you need to understand about each of those, and that they are really based on that notion of kings and queens. And if you understand that, then you see this development of leadership theory over the years. Read the article, know what's in the article. It will really help. Thanks.